start. Hi everyone. Today we're going to be doing a presentation on sharp power. We're relating it to the key concept of power and connecting it to the global political challenge of security. So, sharp power is defined as the use of manipulative diplomatic policies by one country to influence and undermine the political system of a target country. Now, what is the difference between sharp power and soft power? These two are very similar, but soft power is more about influence and sharp power is more about control. Sharp power can include attempts of a certain country to manipulate the educational systems and media resources of another country, known as the target country. And this is usually done to change the public opinion and manipulate the public. And mostly it's done to divert negative attention away from that country. And now, Era is going to be talking about how security is related to sharp power.
Sharp power is usually used by authoritarian countries to manipulate the information that goes to another country, mostly using media and threatening web security, which itself can affect political situation and public opinion. To add, education system biasness is a large problem with the countries that usually use sharp power because sometimes the education system uses falsified history, which itself is a problem for inner policy. So further, we're going to tell you about our first case study, which is the claim Peru-China relations. Bilateral relations between Peru and China started in the end of 19th century and continued for more than a century. Actually, a lot of Chinese people live in Peru now, and they are one of minorities that are not expected to be in Peru. It happened because in the middle of 20th century, there was a program of exchange between construction workers and other working class people in Peru and China. So now China mostly uses diplomatic programs such as Beneficia China and Chaowu to control relationships with Peru, and these programs are targeted both on Peruvians and people of Chinese descent. To add, people of Chinese descent usually tend to rely on Chinese sources. This is why Chinese presence in media is a very big influence, and it's not only about media, but also about other projects, for example, massive infrastructure projects in mining, which is created in order to make the public opinion about China more positive. Chinese politicians quite widely use historical falsifications in their relationship with Peru. For example, Zhao Wuyi referred to the noticeable feeling that the Chinese and the indigenous people of America have a common origin. Also, he jumped to the conclusion that the people of both countries experience a natural cultural proximity, which itself cannot be proved at all, and it was denied by historians for the last 10 years. Adding to media presence of China in Peru, there is two most well-known newspapers and media sources that usually use Chinese propaganda and mostly particular language that is telling us about participation of Communist Party of China in Peru's internal politics. And furthermore, state-owned media cooperate quite usually on usual basis, and A lot of Chinese people who live in Peru, they tend to give their children to Chinese Chinese defense schools that teach people kind of biased opinions about China to create a better picture of China in society. Talking about other aspects of this strategy, China uses people-to-people diplomacy, which is a close relationship with local journalists, influencers, previous to China for them, propaganda-related internships, and education for journalists, which is itself a huge threat for freedom of speech and non-biasness of Peruvian media. Further, Shwam is going to tell you about India's sharp power and Nepal as our counterclaim.
So this counterclaim is more of a regional issue, but I'll try to make a broader issue that can connect in a global context. So before I get into the case study itself, first let's talk about the significance of Nepal's geopolitical positioning, and that is because it's right in between China and India, which are both emerging superpowers and trying to broaden their influence. And they kind of use Nepal as a land where they can battle over, like have a proxy battle over which country gets more influence in this region. And how has India been doing that? Well, it's mainly through media control. And if I were to go out on a limb, I'd say India owns over like 80% of the media market share, in a sense that most of the news outlets, most of the media sources in Nepal, in traditional, at least in traditional TV broadcasting, are originate from India. And with that, it gives India a lot of cultural influence over Nepal. That being said, in a political standpoint, India has not been able to completely have Nepal leaning towards it, as just because of the mere fact that India cannot maintain a media monopoly over Nepal. That is to say that just because there's other media and other news outlets, people have the freedom to choose whether or not to trust Indian news sources. So I'll just go over the point once again, and in a more broader sense, due to the fact that we live in like a globalized, in the world, most countries are globalized and are democracies that allows more decentralized media and more media to exist. Like people have the choice, and people are more aware of media biases, and ultimately, it's the people's choice to whether trust the media or not. And that is a very postmodernist, like it's supported by postmodernist belief that said that media cannot be concentrated in a few hands, rather it flows in a fluid way. So what this all means is, even if a country is dedicated to use star power and is influencing or controlling another country's media, just because of the mere fact that there are other media, other news outlets existing, and people are wary of media biases and state influences on media, uh, it's ultimately the people's choice whether to believe the news or not. So by like in that logic, like just controlling media is kind of a fruitless effort. Yep.
Okay, so to conclude, we've talked a little bit about what sharp power is, and we've looked at two case studies. And if we talk about the impact of sharp power in the future, I think it's only going to increase because sharp power is very heavily dependent on technology, and technology is increasing very rapidly every day. This can also be related to structural realism because the primary goal of a certain country in this case is their own survival, and they don't really mind taking control of another country's resources completely for their own benefit. So that was our presentation. I hope you enjoyed it. Thank you so much.